So, hello and welcome back to the Unforced Error. We're here on the Sunday of Indian Wells. It's been a great competition, so we're just here to preview the two finals, have a brief look back on the two semi-finals. And so the women's one is starting around 8 o'clock Irish time here, so we're a few hours away. So, two mouth-watering finals, I believe, for different reasons. I suppose the men's one is a matchup. We'll get into them now, but the men's is a matchup we've only seen once before, and it was a long time ago, so it means nothing now. And then the women's one, we have a rematch of the amazing Australian Open final. So it'll be really interesting to see that. So what else would you be doing on a Sunday night? So we'll talk about the men's one first, and we'll have a brief try and talk about the competition through what these two men have done to get there. So we've Medvedev against Alcaraz. Medvedev has been on an amazing winning streak, and he's playing really, really well, even on a surface that he doesn't particularly like. He's voiced his frustration more than once this time at the different conditions, and so with Indian Wells, a lot of players have talked about the kind of changing conditions or kind of how difficult they are to adapt, and a lot of players finding the courts very, very slow, a lot slower in some cases than some of the clay courts, depending on the weather and stuff like that. But he's voiced his frustration. He's gotten them out of his system, and he's playing amazing, amazing tennis. He played Frances Tiafoe in a pretty entertaining semi-final near the end. Anyway, he was in control for a lot of the game, but he missed a lot of match points. Tiafoe in the second set started coming up to the net really aggressively, and it was working. It took amazing shots to work around him, and it's just going to be interesting to see if he'll kind of look at how that worked, even though he did it for a brief time, and see can he incorporate that into his game a bit more going into the future. He feeds off the audience as well, or the crowd, and when he saved that many match points, and then they play. I think Medvedev must have lost about 6 or 7, and then went into a tiebreak and still won it. So he's really great under pressure, and I think that's why he's gonna be confident as well going into the final as well, because I think the type of crowds he's good at. He's kind of been the villain for a long time. Crowds have kind of gone against him for a while, but he's kind of turned the corner now. He's kind of put himself out there a bit more, and of course that great US Open win a few years ago as well. So he's a lot more of a known identity now. So yeah, the match point, his movement, Medvedev's movement, was really amazing, and it was more tactics. It was kind of using his intelligence, but the way he could cover the ground on the court was really amazing. One shot near the end, Tiafoe hit a really nice sliced drop shot, and Medvedev was at the left kind of back corner of the court, sprinted right to the kind of right foreground, if you will, and kind of brought the ball up just nearly as it's hitting his laces around the net, and just dropped on the line. And it was a really amazing shot, and the racket nearly brushed off his foot as he hit. That's how low it was. So yeah, it's a really interesting matchup now with Alcaraz. Medvedev is using his mind as much as his kind of overall really strong game, and it's interesting as well. He's so great at using power against people, and Alcaraz is good at that as well. So it'll be really interesting matchup there as well for that. So I suppose he's a great watcher of the game, Medvedev, as well. He would watch a lot of the tournaments that he's in. So it's going to be interesting. He's at a different point in his career than Alcaraz as well, kind of more experienced, but I suppose Alcaraz is nearly number one and has as many Grand Slam titles as him. But Medvedev, when he's hot, is really difficult to, and does Alcaraz have the kind of mindset tactically to match up against him. So yeah, he reminds me a bit of Pekula in terms of when you're talking to him in his interviews. Very candid about things, kind of open about how he feels about most things, obviously private about his own tactics and stuff, but very candid about other players. And stuff like that. So he is very refreshing at times. And so Alcaraz beat Yannick Sinner. He It was more straightforward than he probably thought it would have been. They played a great. The last time they played was 4 or 5 hours, but he did kind of have a rough middle patch where he kind of faded away, but he still won the set and is playing amazing tennis and saying all the right things. Very, very collected man, really, even though he's only 19. And his serve was very, very good to him when he was going through that rocky period as well. And that's not that he has a weak serve, but it's not something that he would necessarily have an advantage over most players. And but if he can keep that steady, and he probably will, that'll be the big thing for him against Medvedev, is holding his own serve, especially the way Medvedev glances the power back to you. But as I said, this match is interesting because he does that as well. He's also a great mover and a great ball striker. So this is going to be really interesting. They played a couple of years ago at Wimbledon, but Alcaraz is 19, so a couple of years ago was probably when he was 16 or 17 and Medvedev won. But, that's really immaterial now because Alcaraz is now a fully formed man and on the brink of world number one again. So that match is irrelevant. So that's the men's. In the women's, as I said, we have a rematch of Aryna Sabalenka and Rybakina. And so Sabalenka played Sakkari in the semi-final. One more difficult than the scoreline would have made out. Not that she was under real pressure in the second set, but during the first set, there was a few key points that Sakkari lost that kind of led to that scoreline. And I really feel for Sakkari. It's a couple of semi-finals now. We've talked about this before, that she just hasn't gotten over the line, and she hasn't necessarily played poorly, and she's fought till the end. She's doing all the right things, and you just wonder, what can she do? Can she add something to her team? Is it something she's doing wrong, or does it something she just needs to add? Because my heart really went out for her there, because she's been on the brink so many times. Such a great player and moved really well, hit some amazing shots. But Sabalenka, even not at her best, was unplayable at times. And there's one shot in the second set where she basically bent it around the kind of right side of the net and it went right down the line with power. And there's only so much you can do with shots like that. But Sakkari was really impressed with her attitude, fought till the end, but your heart will go out to her. Now, she did make the final here last year, but she lost out, unfortunately. But I don't rule Sakkari out as well. A lot of people kind of writing her off in terms of can get to a semi-final and then it kind of fades away, but I really wouldn't rule her out. I really think she's a Grand Slam winner. I can't put my finger on what exactly needs to change. But she's a great player to watch. The match could have been a lot better. I think on another day they play, and it's a real classic. It was on. There were two of my favorite players, and it was on late at night here on Friday, and I was quite tired. But two of my favorite players. I was really looking forward to the match, and I'm very glad I watched it. I still think it'll be worth watching the next time, whenever they do play. And then Rybakina beat Iga Swiatek again. A surprise, but Rybakina beat her in the Australian Open, and Iga is, she said, a little bit hampered through injury. She expressed having some discomfort in her ribs, I think it was. So Miami is next, and she talked about having an extra day actually to recover for that. But Rybakina is probably playing just as well as she's maintained that level, and that's what we wondered about both Sabalenka and Rybakina. After the Australian Open, could they maintain this extremely high level? And they most certainly haven't. Sabalenka has kicked on, and so has Rybakina, and Rybakina talked in the press conference about doing that in pre-season and kind of hoping to keep that level of consistency up as a goal and not just be a kind of flash in the pan every so often. And this isn't her strong, well, neither for Sabalenka, the slower courts. It's kind of not ironic, but interesting that two of the big hitters, even on a slower surface, have risen to the top. And I suppose Sabalenka had a really tough quarterfinal against Krejcikova, who won the doubles and is playing extremely well. But other than that, it was very smooth sailing. Now Rebecca has had some longer games, but again, she's made it through. And as I said, there's been, I suppose the courts are different on different days. I think it was quite windy during the quarterfinal day, and then for the semi-finals it was less so. Yeah, and Rebecca was really beaming after her semi-final win. She knew she played well, and when a player says that, because even Medvedev after his game was delighted, but he was really mad at himself that he didn't, finish the game up quicker and take advantage of some of those early match points. But Rebecca, you could just see it in her, was absolutely beaming. So it's going to be a great rematch. It's on in a couple hours. I don't know what else you'd be doing on a Sunday evening, but it's going to be fascinating. So 2 fascinating games for contrasting reasons, and we should see a really high quality of tennis. I've no doubt we will. It's hard to put your finger on who would win. I think it's pretty much even money in both. But it's just fascinating, and for Alcaraz as well, it's great to be able to study him now from a tactical point of view. We have the physical attributes, but let's see how he can handle the kind of mind of Medvedev, and let's see if Rybakina wants revenge against Sabalenka. So that's it for now. We'll be back probably during the week with a bit of a recap, and we might have a look at Miami as well, see how we're going. Wish I could have done more for Indian Wells, but it just hasn't turned out that way, unfortunately. But it's great to be here. Enjoy the finals, and we'll chat to you as soon as I can. Thanks a minute.